October 3, 1943. 30,000 feet above the cold gray waters of the North Sea, the freezing metal of a 50 caliber Browning machine gun pressed against a waist gunner's cheek as he tracked a Messerschmitt Bf-109 slicing through the bomber formation 200 yards out. His breath fogged the gun sight, his gloved fingers trembling, not from fear, but from what he was about to do. Every instinct screamed to aim directly at the enemy, to put the reticle squarely on the German's nose and pull the trigger. But he didn't. He aimed 6 aircraft lengths behind the fighter, squeezed the trigger, and the gun thundered to life. 2 seconds later, the Messerschmitt disintegrated in a burst of fire and falling metal. In that instant, this gunner proved something that defied every instinct and common sense. When shooting from a moving bomber at a moving target, aiming directly at the enemy meant missing every time. The secret to survival was aiming where the enemy had already been. It was a revelation born not from luck, but from years of study, physics, and training, a technique that would turn frightened gunners into the deadliest defensive marksmen of the war. And that revelation had begun 3 years earlier in a place no one expected, the barren desert outside Las Vegas, Nevada. January 25, 1941. Colonel Martinez Steeneth stepped out of his car into 60 square miles of absolute nothing. Sand, scrub, and wind stretched to the horizon. This desolate wasteland would soon become the most important aerial gunnery school in American history. The problem facing the Army Air Corps was both simple and terrifying. The United States had no schools dedicated to training aerial gunners, not one standardized curriculum, not one set of proven methods to teach farm boys how to shoot from a moving aircraft at a target moving hundreds of miles an hour. Without trained gunners, the entire strategic bombing campaign would collapse before it began. Heavy bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress carried 13 50 caliber guns, but without men who knew how to use them, they were useless. The British had learned that lesson in blood. Their gunners, trained only on ground targets, were slaughtered by German fighters in the night skies over Europe. The Americans were determined not to repeat that mistake. Construction crews arrived in March, transforming the desert into a base of barracks, classrooms, and firing ranges. By June, over 100 instructors had arrived, facing the monumental challenge of teaching a skill no one in the country truly understood. 2 days after Pearl Harbor, the orders came down. The base was to be activated immediately. The war had begun, and America needed gunners fast. The first trainees arrived at Las Vegas Army Airfield just before Christmas, and their journey began with shotguns and clay pigeons. They learned to shoot moving targets from stationary platforms, practicing the age-old art of leading a target. But the moment the instructors mounted those shotguns onto the backs of moving trucks, everything they knew fell apart. The clay pigeons sailed through the air untouched, no matter how carefully they aimed ahead. Confusion swept through the ranks. They were doing exactly what their instincts told them. Why were they missing? The answer lay in a truth so counterintuitive that even experienced instructors struggled to explain it. Sergeant Robert Hayes, a Texan with a knack for physics, stood before his students and drew a simple diagram. A bomber moving at 300 miles per hour. A fighter closing from the side at the same speed. A bullet leaving the barrel of the gun. The students assumed the bullet traveled straight. It didn't. It carried the bomber's forward motion with it, curving through the air in a diagonal path. The faster the bomber flew, the more pronounced the curve. To hit a fighter attacking from the side, a gunner had to aim not ahead, but behind. Hayes demonstrated with the string and weight, walking forward as it swung. The weight, he explained, behaved just like their bullets. It didn't drop straight. It carried forward. The lesson was clear. When you're moving and your target is moving, the rules flip. To hit your mark, you must shoot where the target was, not where it is. By 1942, this principle became the foundation of what would be called position firing. Instead of firing instinctively, gunners were trained to calculate deflection, to predict where the fighter and bullet would meet in space. Charts, diagrams, and mathematical tables filled classrooms. Gunners memorized radians of deflection, each representing the angular distance they needed to aim behind the fighter. At a 90-degree attack, that might mean aiming as much as 12 aircraft lengths behind the enemy. It sounded insane, but it worked. And by the summer of 1942, Las Vegas was producing 600 new gunners every 5 weeks. Their 6-week training course became a model of precision and intensity. Week 1 was ground school, learning the Browning machine gun, aircraft recognition, and the physics of ballistics. Week 2, they climbed on board trucks to shoot moving targets, forcing their brains to unlearn instinct. Week 3 introduced manipulation trainers, mock turrets where students tracked wire-suspended dummy planes through the sky. Week 4 brought the Wallard trainer, an early flight simulator projecting enemy fighters onto a curved screen, recording every shot and teaching split-second decision-making. By week 5, trainees took to the air in real bombers, firing at towed targets. Their ammunition was color-coded, so instructors could track who hit what. By week 6, only the best remained. Those who passed earned their silver wings and joined bomber crews already flying combat missions over Europe. By mid-1943, over 57,000 aerial gunners had graduated from American schools. But training was one thing, combat was another. On August 17, 1943, 376 B-17 bombers flew deep into Germany, towards Feinfurt and Regensburg. The Luftwaffe threw over 400 fighters against them. In brutal, running battles through clear summer skies, the bombers lost 60 planes, a devastating 20%. But they also shot down 27 German fighters, an outcome that stunned both sides.
Waist gunners trained in the Nevada desert used their deflection charts and position firing instinctively. They aimed not at the fighters, but behind them, trusting their training, and their bullets found their marks. Those who ignored their training, who aimed directly, missed. For the first time, mathematics had proven more powerful than instinct. But as the war intensified, so did technology. In late 1943, the British introduced a new tool, the Mark II gyro gun sight. It used spinning gyroscopes to calculate deflection automatically. The Americans quickly adapted it for their own aircraft, creating the K-14 and similar systems for bomber turrets. With dual reticles, one fixed, one moving, the sight showed gunners exactly where to aim. All they had to do was keep the moving reticle on the target. In tests, hit accuracy doubled almost overnight. It was a revolution that freed gunners from the mental strain of calculating angles in the heat of combat. By mid-1944, thousands of bombers carried these sights or simpler compensating versions that adjusted automatically for airspeed and altitude. Training also continued to evolve. New methods like Operation Pinball brought realism to unheard-of levels. At Las Vegas, instructors flew armored Bell RP-63 King Cobras, brightly painted and equipped with sensors that lit up when hit by special frangible bullets. Students fired at real maneuvering aircraft for the first time. The effect was transformative. Accuracy improved by up to 40%, and trainees gained confidence that no simulator could provide. By early 1945, the 7 gunnery schools together had trained over 200,000 gunners. When the B-29 Superfortress entered the Pacific War, it carried an entirely new innovation: remote-controlled turrets linked to computers that automatically calculated deflection and bullet drop. Gunners sat inside pressurized compartments, guiding their turrets through periscope sights. The computers did the math, the gunners focused on tracking the target against fast Japanese fighters. The system was devastatingly effective. It was the ultimate expression of the lesson first learned in Nevada, that human instinct could not outguess physics, but technology and training together could. By the end of the war, over 214,000 men had graduated from America's gunnery schools. Las Vegas alone produced 44,000 of them. They had learned a lesson that went against every natural urge, to aim not at the enemy, but behind. The statistics are difficult to measure, but the evidence was clear. Properly trained gunners were twice as effective as untrained ones. Their survival depended not on courage alone, but on their ability to think like mathematicians in the chaos of combat. They were the living embodiment of disciplined precision, men who had reprogrammed their instincts to trust in science. The lesson outlasted the war. The principles of position firing carried into Korea, where B-29 gunners used them against Soviet MiG-15 jets. Even today, fighter pilots rely on the same physics, though computers now perform the calculations. The old Las Vegas Army Airfield is now Nellis Air Force Base, home of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School and the Thunderbirds. The desert ranges where those first students once fired from truck beds are long gone, but the principle they learned still stands. When you're moving, you don't aim where the target is, you aim where it was. It's a lesson that speaks to more than war. It's about the human capacity to learn what feels wrong and trust what works. Those young men who once fumbled shotguns in the desert became the defenders of the skies because they learned to let go of instinct and embrace calculation. They learned to trust in equations written on blackboards. In the words of instructors who told them to aim behind when everything in them screamed to aim ahead. And when the bullets flew and the enemy closed in, that trust saved their lives. The story of position firing is not just about physics. It's about faith in reason, about the triumph of training over instinct. In a world where chaos ruled the skies, they learned that survival often means doing the opposite of what feels right. They aimed where the enemy wasn't, and because of that, thousands of them came home. Physics doesn't care what feels natural. It only cares what works. And over the battlefields of World War II, what worked was the impossible idea born in the Nevada desert. To hit a target in motion, you must aim behind.